This is Kat with Beadaholique, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make the Loom Bracelet kits. Now these are exclusive Beadaholique kits that you can only get by shopping at beadaholique.com. So what I have here today is I have the 4 different varieties that we have. So we have 2 gold and 2 silver. So whichever one you choose, you'll get the coordinated pattern and colors. So let's talk about what you're going to get with your kit. So like I said, you'll get your 3 colors of your 11-0 seed beads. You'll get your NYMO size D thread, and you'll also get your tube clasp, which already has a nice little lobster and a chain extender attached. Now, if you need to purchase the loom, you can purchase the full kit, and that will give you the loom and the glue. So your loom will come with your loom here, and I'll show you how to set it up. It will also come with a needle, and then you'll also get an E6000 as well, because we're going to need that glue to help tie off and secure our weaving. Alright, so what you won't get with your kit, just a couple of basic tools, is you'll need a pair of snips or scissors, and then you'll need a pair of chain nose pliers. And then if you find that you need some additional needles, we recommend the Beadalon Jewel Loom needles, and you'll get a nice pack of 6. This does not come with the kit does come with a single needle, but if you need some extras, this is what we recommend. And then you'll also get your color coordinated pattern, and I'll talk to you about that in just a moment here. But let me bring your attention back over here because I just want to point out one of the things that we offer here at Beadaholique is we offer refill kits. So like I was saying, if you already have your jewel loom and your E6000, go ahead and purchase a refill kit. You'll get your clasp, your thread, and your beads. And of course you'll get that beautiful pattern and the written instructions as well. But what you can do is you can purchase one full and then the others as refills. That way you don't need to purchase additional looms, and it's more cost effective. So one thing I want to point out to you is that we have given you the same number of beads to do each of the patterns. So let's say you wanted to do this particular pattern, this pink one here, in these colors, you can absolutely do that. You just need to purchase both, and then you can kind of mix and match your colors. So that's a great little tip if you wanted to sort of purchase the additional ones, and then you can also use that pattern to create your own. So very fun. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in and get started setting up our loom. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our loom here, and mine is already a little bit bowed because I've used it quite a lot. But what's going to happen is it's going to come flat to you like this, and this is a little tension rod here. So when you're looking at your blue loom like this, there's a front and a back. So the back side has these little knobs, and that's going to help us secure our thread. So if you flip it to the front side here, what we're going to do is we're just going to take our little rod here and put it into one hole. And then we're just going to bend it so we can get it into that second hole. So that's going to keep that tension nice and secure for us. So our bead work is going to lay on top there. So that's easy. So we have our loom set up. So now let's go ahead and start utilizing our thread here. So I'm just going to take some of that off there. All right, and you can go ahead and leave it on the spool for this next part. Go ahead and flip your loom over. And onto the back here, what we're going to do is we're just going to make a little knot. So I'm making just a little loop with just a little overhand knot. There we go. And what I want to do is I just want to tie that onto that little knob in the back. So I'm actually going to do a little double knot just to secure it, because this is going to be where we're going to anchor all of our threads. All right, so now I'm just flipping it over. So you see how at the top there they have all these little notches? So our piece is going to be 17 beads wide, which means we need 18 of our warp threads. So you can just start a few in there. You can see this is going to be about centered. So we just go and we have, excuse me, we have one thread in one notch, and then I just come down here and just kind of eyeball it and line it up. You can count if you'd like, but it'll be the same. All right, so then we come to the back, and then we're just going to wrap that around, going around, and then I'm going to go around one more time there just to secure that first one, and then come back up, and now we're coming around from that second notch there and going all the way back down to the side and down there, and then coming to the back. Now this one I'm just going to wrap that once just to secure it, and then up and over. And we're going to do this for all 18. So you can just start to just move it across And just making sure, because what's nice about these little notches is it's going to help separate all those threads for you. All right, so I'm going to do all 18, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you how we're going to tie this off in the back there. So this is my 18th, and setting it in the notch, and I'm going to flip my work around. So you should be at the starting point where we had that little tail. Actually, let me show you guys this way. There you go. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give myself a little tail here and just sort of snip that off. And what I want to do is I want to come in and just kind of wind it around that little knob there, just going around and around and around. And then take that little tail, and what I'm going to do is take the beginning tail and just tie a little knot just to secure this. We're going to end up tying and cutting all this off in the end, so just do as many knots as you feel to make it secure. All right, and then I'm just going to trim my little tails so they don't get in my way. All right. So this is our loom. We have it set up. You should have some good little tension. It should kind of look like a little bow. So we have that all set up for us and ready to go. All right, so the next part here, and I'm actually going to move some of these bracelets out of the way. There we go. All right. So we're going to take our needle and we're going to use some thread. Now for this, go ahead and I like to use kind of an arm's length, I'll say. You will end up cutting off and tying off thread and adding new thread. There's no way to do this with one full length. I think you'll just end up getting frustrated. So I am going to show you how to tie off and add new thread. But go ahead and thread your needle. La, la, la. All right, there we go. All right, so I have my needle thread and I've doubled it back, maybe about a quarter or so. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do, and let me bring out my pattern here, and I just wanna show you on all 4 patterns, everything is color coordinated to your specific pattern. And we've tried to make them nice and contrast so that they're easy to read. So the pattern I'm gonna do here, this is gonna be our Jackson Hole version. So you can see on our bracelet here, we've split it up into 2 parts to make it a little bit easier to read. So we're going to start at the top and work our way down, and then go to the B pattern and work our way down. So we kind of have our nice little starting and ending points there. So before we begin, one thing I want to talk to you about is sizing, because this is going to matter on how everything begins. So let me show you on a ruler here. So the patterns that we've created are finite patterns, meaning they have a nice central point and they work out, so they're doubled. Kind of if you fold it in half, it'll be the same. So pattern end to pattern end, you're looking at only about 5 3/4 inches. But when you take into account the lobster clasp and the chain extender, you're going to get a good 8 3/4 inch bracelet at most. So here's what I'll say to that. If you would like a shorter bracelet, what we've done, and you can see this here at the very top, we've done some solid rows of colors. So you can just eliminate those rows if you want it to be shorter. Just make sure you're doing that on both sides. But if you want it to be longer, you can just continue that. So let's say you wanted to do the cream, the pumpkin, and the cranberry. And then you can just do cream, pumpkin, cranberry, cream, pumpkin, cranberry. Because what you're not seeing in there, and let me again just bring in the pattern, is we have that row of the pumpkin there, and that is actually underneath this tube clasp. So as you're kind of looking at this, you're saying, oh, well, there's 4 rows there. But that's how you can easily extend the size. Let's say you wanted a 9-inch bracelet, you can just add a couple of rows on each side. So with all of that said, let me set that up there and bring my loom back in here. Now I'm going to follow my pattern exactly. So what that means is I'm going to start with that 1 row of the full pumpkin, and I'm going to show you what I'm going to do here. So let's add, so it's going to be, like we said, there's 17 beads wide, so we're going to add 17 of our pumpkin beads. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. Okay, So what you want to do with the loom is you want to keep all the beads on your needle. That's why we give you the nice long loom needle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going underneath all those threads. And I'm going to start maybe about 2 inches from the top here. So now I'm just going to kind of use my finger to sort of place them all in between the little the warp threads there. So the ones that go top to bottom, these are your warp, and the ones that go side to side, those are your weft threads. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to pull my needle through, and we're pulling it through all along the bottom there. And here's what I recommend. If this is going to be your first row and you're not quite sure how long you want your bracelet to be, you might want to add some length. Go ahead and leave an extra long tail because you can use this to add in later so you don't have to add a whole extra piece of thread. So if you're unsure if you're going to want to add a couple rows at the end, oops, and come on. This first row is always tricky, especially when you do something silly like that. And you can just see that I'm just placing, just making sure. There we go. Okay. So before I go any further, I'm going to go over the top and go back through all of those beads. And just make sure that you're catching all of the beads. And like I said, this first row is going to be really slow. Just take your time and pull that all the way through. All right, so now let's take a moment to just sort of adjust. And this is where you can use your needle because it's a nice straight edge just to get it right up there. Perfect. All right, so now we're going to do the same thing with our other color. So we're going to go in for this sort of wine cranberry, and we're going to do another row of 17. So I'm going to do the first couple of rows, and then I'm going to show you guys how to really read the pattern. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. Okay, so same thing. We're just going to come underneath here and sort of press it up. You'll see that it starts to take shape. And what I like to do is just kind of separate some of those beads, make sure those warp threads get down in there because we don't want to drop a bead. All right, so we're going to pull that. And don't worry that they're not touching just yet. We're going to fix that. And go ahead and carefully sneak your needle through right over the top of all those warp threads and pull back through. All right, and again, we're just going to kind of scooch everything up and give it a little tension, a little tug. We want to make sure that they're going to start to fit nice and tightly there. All right, so let's continue. All right, so I'm going to do a row of the pumpkin and then a row of the cream, and then I'm going to show you guys how we're going to kind of read the pattern and work down through the pattern. All right, so I will be right back in just a moment. So now I have the first 4 rows here. So I have that row of pumpkin that's going to disappear inside of our clasp, and then those 3 colorful rows. So let's go over here to the colorful pattern so I can kind of show you guys how this is going to work. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of follow along with our next row here, and we're just going to work our way across, and then we're going to work our way down. So you just follow along with that next row. So it's going to be 1 of the wine, 3 of the cream, and then 9 of the pumpkin, 3 of the cream, and then 1 of the wine. So sometimes when I'm working on a loom pattern, I'll just take a little pen and I'll just do a little tick mark just so I always remember where I am. I'll just do a little tick off to the side. That's also really helpful if you are going to put this down for a moment and then come back to it. So let's go ahead and add that row so we can start to see that pattern develop. So we are going to do 1 of the wine, 3 of the cream, 9 of the pumpkin, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, 3 of the cream, 1, 2, and 3, and 1 of the wine. All right, so I have it on my needle just like we've been doing. I'm going to come in here and just sort of set that up into the top there, and you can start to see that it's a little bit easier to get it into those notches. There we go. And I'm going to pull it across. And now that we've got a little bit more of a structure here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of take my nail and just sort of push them up just gently And you can see that I'm keeping my finger behind there just to kind of make sure that they pop up through. And I'm just going to tighten that thread there. Don't pull too tight. If you pull too tight, it'll kind of squish it all together. So you want to give it a little bit of room just to breathe. But we want everything to be snug, but just not too taut. All right, so now I'm going to take my needle, sneak it back over the top. And that is the first row of our pattern. So I'm going to do a little bit more weaving, and then I'll be right back to show you guys how to tie off and add new thread, because you probably won't get too far on the thread that you have. You might be able to get about a halfway or a third of the way. So keep on weaving, and then wherever you are, wherever you run out of thread, it's the same technique to tie off and add thread. So I'll be right back to show you how to do that. Okay, so if you've gotten to a point where you're ready to tie off your thread, I say don't wait till you have only a few inches. I'd say at least 8 inches. I obviously have a little bit more here today for my demonstration, but don't wait too long to tie off and add new thread. So what we're going to do here is I'm just going to take my needle and I'm going to go back through the row previous to it, and I'm going to go back through only a couple of beads. And you see how I have my needle kind of coming up out of those first 3 beads? So it's just coming up out of there, and I'm going to pull that through, and your thread should kind of disappear. And then what I want to do is I want to take my needle and I'm going to sneak it down in there, and I'm going to catch that warp thread. So I've caught that 3rd little warp thread there, or technically it's the 4th, it's after the 3rd bead. And I'm going to pull that through, and I'm just going to leave a little loop. And I'm going to stick my needle through there, and this is going to create a little knot. So I'm just going to bring it up, and that knot should disappear right into the loom work. So then I'm just going to continue, and I'm going to weave across, getting my needle into that next little bead there. There we go. And going across a few more beads. And I'm just going to repeat that whole process just twice. You really don't need to worry too much about adding several knots. Just 2 should be enough. So again, same thing, going up through that little loop and tying that little knot. And now, just kind of take your needle and go through a couple of beads there. And I'm just going to pull that through. Sorry, I'm trying to turn it around so you guys can see. There we go. There we go, pulling it through. And that little knot should disappear right there, and I'm just going to kind of scooch all my beadwork up, just make sure everything is nice and secure. And then you can come in with your snips or your scissors and just get really nice and close and snip that off. I don't recommend snipping it off at the end. Sometimes you'll get the little pokey ends that'll come right back through. All right, so to add on a new piece of thread, it's pretty much the same situation. So let's go ahead and add a new thread to our needle. There we go. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do kind of the same thing. So I'm going to go through a couple of beads there. And I can leave a much shorter tail here because I won't be adding on more beads, so this will just be clipped off later and just woven in. So I can just leave that short. And I'm going to go down, catch a little thread bridge, and go back through my little loop. And for this one, I'm going to finish and go all the way through that whole row. Get all that thread in the way. Here we go. There we go. All the way out to the outside. All right, so now what I need to do is I'm going to go back through the row beneath there and just run it all the way across, just as though we were finishing that row from before. So now I'm ready because I'm coming out on top, and I'm ready to add another row and go down through the bottom, just like before. All right, so the last thing is once you're done, you'll have some little tails here. And let me go ahead and remove this needle here, because all I want to do is just kind of run it back through so that we don't have to cut it off at the edge like I was saying. You can if you want. You don't have to do this extra step. It's just my little thing that I like to do. So I'm just going to go back through a few beads up at the top, do a little tiny knot, go back through a bead or two. And this will make your thread work really secure because we really don't want you guys to lose any beads. I know it's a lot of little knots in there, but it will help your beadwork look nice and secure. Come in, snip that off, and now we have our brand new length of thread ready to go. So I'm just going to rethread my needle, continue my pattern. So at this point, you guys are free to continue the whole pattern until we get to the end, and then I'm going to show you our little technique for tying off and adding that clasp. So go ahead and finish up your pattern, and I'll be back to show you how to finish it in just a moment. So if you've done your full weave, this is what you should have. Now I've gone ahead and tied off and woven in all of my threads. So once you get to this point, we're ready to take it off the loom. So we're going to go ahead and flip that over so we can expose the back there. And then just take your scissors or snips and just gently come in and start cutting off those little cords there. There we go. And that side should come off. And then we can move to the other side here, and you can just clip all those cords off. And go ahead and set your loom aside. All right, so this is what we have now. So what we're going to do is we're going to use our little Post-it notes here, our little sticky notes, and we're going to use those to kind of separate the threads because you can see that they kind of get all a little bit tangled here. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to take my one little note here, and I'm going to separate only the first two pieces. And I'm just going to set that down on my work surface. So it just kind of gets the other ones out of the way so I can do this really easily. So now I'm going to take the two cords here, and I'm just going to tie a little overhand knot. Just very simple, basic knot, and bring that all the way down so it sits right on top of that little bead right there. And then I'm just going to repeat that one more time and make another little knot. So I have two overhand knots right there. So now this is another opportunity to use our little sticky note. I'm going to separate these two aside. Now I'm going to do the same, working down with the next two. And just separate those. Make a little overhand knot, bringing it down. Another little overhand knot, bring that one down. And now here's what I'm going to do. So I have a set of 4 here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate that first one, and I'm going to separate that second knot that I have there. So you can see that I kind of have one from each side of the knots together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these and do that same thing and work with them as one cord. So I'm going to tie all 4 of these together and make a little knot that's going to sit just above there. There you go. All right, so now we're going to set that aside, and we're going to work our way down. So we have 18 of these, so we're just going to do that for the next several, and then when you get to the end, you'll notice that you only have 2 left. So what I recommend doing is just taking those last little 2 and tying 4 overhand knots. So I'm going to continue to do that, and then I will meet you back here, and we will add some glue to that. Okay, so we have our sets of our doubles here. So we have 4 sets of the doubles, and then that little knot on the end, so that's 4 of those little knots. So this is nice and secure now. So the next step to just add a little bit of extra security to our knots is we're going to use some E6000 glue. So go ahead and open up your glue, And if you're using a fresh glue, you just puncture the end by using that little tab on the back of the cap. And then I'm just going to put some onto my little post-it note, another great use for it. And then a toothpick works great, so we're just going to get a little bit of E6000 on our toothpick here. And then I'm just going to kind of dab it onto each of those little knots. Now don't be worried about being too light with the glue. This will all be covered by the clasp, so just make sure that those glue knots are really nice and saturated. We're going to cut all of this off later anyway. We're going to cut off at the base there. So once you're getting some of that glue in there, we just want to make sure that you really get the glue into those knots, because this is going to secure your whole bracelet and we really don't want you to lose any beads. All right, so there we go. So now you're going to repeat this entire process on the other side of the bracelet. And then once you're done with that, I'll show you how easy it is to add on that tube clasp. I've let my loom dry for a little over an hour, so now it's ready to start moving on to the next step. So I'm going to remove my post-it notes here and just kind of bring out my bracelet. So now I have the glue and it's all along those little knots there. So I'm just going to come in, and you can take your scissors or your snips. And what you're going to do is you're going to cut just above all those little knots. Go slow, you don't want to cut your knots. But don't worry if you have a little extra thread, that's all going to kind of disappear in this next step there. So there's one side, and let me flip it over and do the second side. All right, there we go. Okay, so now we have our loomed piece. So what we're going to do is we're going to attach our tube clasp, or our slide end clasp here. So this has a nice little well in it that goes all the way across. So all we're going to do is just kind of slide it onto our loom. But for a little added security, we're going to add a little bit of E6000 into that clasp. So I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit more on my paper there. And then kind of dragging the toothpick through there so it gets on the toothpick a little bit further up, because what we're going to do now is I'm just going to kind of slide it in there and just sort of circle it around just so it hits the walls of that tube clasp, just for a little added security there. And I'm just kind of twisting and wiping my toothpick off there. So not a lot, just a little bit. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to slide that tube clasp right over that first row of beads. And just kind of, you might just have to kind of wiggle it and go slow. You just need one bead at a time. There we go. And to get our last bead in there, all the way up to the top. And then finally, you're going to take your little chain nose pliers and go ahead and give that a little bit of a bend, just enough. And then here's a great little tip so that you don't sort of scratch this, is just use your work surface and just kind of press, and it'll set into place. So let me show you that whole process one more time. We'll do it on the other side here. A little bit of glue. Again, kind of dragging your toothpick through there. You don't need too much. You can see how little I'm using. And then we're just going to set it inside and just kind of bounce back and forth, hitting all the walls, kind of twisting it, making sure it gets all in there, and bringing that out. And then we're repeating the same thing on this side. Go ahead and slide your tube clasp over that last row of beads there. Going just one at a time. It should slide over nice and easy. There we go. A couple more. And last one there. All right, and again, coming in with our chain nose pliers, giving it a little tiny bend, and then using our work surface to press that down. And you are all finished. So that is the Loom Bracelet Kits by Beadaholique. And here we recommend letting it dry for at least 24 hours before you wear it. We just want to make sure that that glue has enough time to fully bond before you start putting any tension on your bracelet. But that is it. So let me draw your eyes up here so you can see all 4 color varieties that we have. And you can choose your favorites. And again, we have the refill kits and the full kits for you to choose from by heading over to beadaholique.com. And if you're new to our YouTube channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button below to get all the latest from Beadaholique.